Hi guys. We are about to start our awesome cursive in third grade. I know cursive is one of the topics that everybody gets excited about. When we hear third grade, we think, oh, I'm going to learn cursive this year, along with multiplication. But today we're going to start our cursive unit. And I love to start this unit with one of my favorite stories by Beverly Cleary, who has written the Ramona series and the Pest and the Pain and the Great One and all those wonderful stories. And this book is about Muggy Maggie, and she is a little nervous about cursive and doesn't really want to learn cursive. But we're going to see in this funny story how cursive really is important. Muggy Maggie. To a third grade girl who wondered why no one ever wrote a book to help third graders read cursive writing. If you think about it, all the texts that we read are not in cursive. They are just in regular print. But it would be neat if somebody wrote a book all in cursive while you're learning cursive so you can learn to read cursive. Chapter 1. After her first day in the third grade, Maggie Schultz jumped off the bus when it stopped at her corner. Bye, Joanne, she called to the girl who was her best friend sometimes. See you tomorrow. Maggie was happy to escape from sixth grade boys who called her a cootie and from fourth grade boys who insisted the third grade was awful. Cursive handwriting, and Miss Lepper, the teacher, was mean. Her dog Kaiser was waiting for her. When Maggie knelt to hug him, Kaiser licked her face. He was a young, eager dog the Schultzes had chosen from the SPCA's Pick a Pet page in the newspaper. A friendly cockapoo looking for a child to love was the description under his picture. A description proved to be right. Come on, Kaiser. Maggie ran home with her fair hair flying and her dog springing along beside her. When Maggie and Kaiser burst through the kitchen door, her mother said, Hi there, Angel Face. How did things go today? She held Kaiser away from the refrigerator with her foot while she put away some milk cartons and vegetables. Mrs. Schultz loved standing on one foot she was good at standing on one foot because 5 mornings a week she taught exercise classes to overweight women. Mrs. Lepper was nice, sort of, began Maggie, except she didn't make me a monitor, and she put Joanne at a different table than me. Too bad, said Mrs. Schultz. Maggie continued. Courtney sits on one side of me and Kelly on the other, and that Kirby Jones, who sits across from me, kept pushing the table into my stomach. And what did you do? Mrs. Schultz was taking eggs out of the carton and setting them in a white plastic tray in the refrigerator. I pushed it right back, Maggie thought a moment before she said. Miss Lepper said we are going to have a happy third grade. That's nice, Mrs. Schultz smiled as she closed the refrigerator. But Maggie was doubtful about a teacher who forecast happiness. How did she know? Still, Maggie wanted her teacher to be happy. Kaiser needs exercise, Mrs. Schultz said. Why don't you take him outside and give him a workout? Maggie's mother thought everyone, including the dogs, needed exercise. Maggie enjoyed chasing Kaiser around the backyard, ducking, dodging, and throwing a dirty tennis ball, wet with dog spit, for him, until he collapsed, panting, and she was out of breath from running and laughing herself. Refreshed and much more cheerful, Maggie was flipping through television channels with the remote control, trying to find funny commercials, when her father came from work. Daddy, Daddy, she cried, running to meet him. He picked her up, kissed her, and asked, How's my Goldilocks? When he set her down, he kissed his wife. Tired, Mrs. Schultz asked. Traffic gets worse every day, he answered. Was this your turn to make the coffee? Demanded Maggie. That's right, grumped Mr. Schultz, half pretending. Other than talking with people who came to see him, Maggie did not really understand what her father did in his office. She did know he made coffee every other day because Miss Madden, his secretary, said she did not go to work in an office just to make coffee. He should take his turn. Miss Madden was such an excellent secretary who could spell, punctuate, and type. that Mr. Schultz put up with his share of coffee making. Maggie found this so funny that she always asked about the coffee. "Did Miss Madden send me a present?" Maggie asked. Her father's secretary often sent Maggie a little present, a tiny bottle of shampoo from a hotel, a free sample of perfume, and once an eraser shaped like a duck. Maggie felt grown up when she wrote thank you notes on her home computer. "Not today." Mr. Schultz tousled Maggie's hair and went to change into his jogging clothes. When dinner was on the table and the family, exercised, happy, and hungry, was seated, Maggie chose the right moment to break her big news. We start cursive this week," she said with a gusty sigh that was supposed to impress her parents with the hard work that lay ahead. Instead, they laughed. Maggie was annoyed. Cursive was serious. She tossed her hair, which was perfect for tossing, wavy and curly to her shoulders. The sort of hair that made women say, "Why wouldn't you, what you would give for that hair?" Or sad voices, "I used to have hair that beautiful color." "Don't look so gloomy," said Maggie's father. "You'll survive." How did he know? Maggie scowled, still hurting from being laughed at, and said, "Cursive is dumb. It's all wrinkled and stuck together, and I can't see why I'm supposed to do it." This was a new thought that popped into her mind that moment. "Because everyone writes cursive," said Mrs. Schwartz, "or almost everybody." "But I can write print, or I can use the computer," said Maggie, arguing mostly just to be arguing. "I'm sure you'll enjoy cursive once you start," said Mrs. Schwartz in a brisk, positive way that always made Maggie feel contrary. "I will not enjoy it," thought Maggie. "And," she said, "all those loops and squiggles. I don't think I'll do it." "Of course you will," said her father. "That's why you go to school." This made Maggie even more contrary. "I'm not going to write cursive, and nobody can make me, so there." "Uh-huh," said her mother so cheerfully that Maggie felt 3 times as contrary. Mr. Schwartz's smile flattened into a straight line. "Just get busy. Do what your teacher says and learn it." The way her father spoke pushed Maggie into further contrariness. She stabbed her fork into her baked potatoes so hard that the handle stood up straight. And then she broke off a piece of her beef patty with her fingers and fed it to the dog. "Maggie, please," said her mother. "Your father has had a hard day, and I haven't had an easy day myself." After teaching her exercise classes in the morning, Mrs. Schwartz spent her afternoons running errands for her family. Dry cleaners, banks, gas stations, markets, post office. Maggie pulled her fork out of her baked potato. Kaiser licked his chops and looked up with her in hope with his brown eyes, his tail wagging. "Kaiser is lucky," she said. "He doesn't have to learn cursive." When her dog heard his name, he stood up, placed his front paws on her lap. "Now you're being silly, Maggie," said her mother. "Down, Kaiser, you old nuisance." Maggie was indignant. "Kaiser is not a nuisance. Kaiser is a loving dog," she informed her father. "Don't try to change the subject," Mr. Schwartz, irritated with Maggie, smiled at his wife, who was pouring him a cup of coffee. "Books are not written in cursive," Maggie pointed out. "I can read chapter books, and not everyone in my class is good at that." Mr. Schwartz sipped his coffee. "True," he admitted, "but many things are written in cursive. Memos, many letters, grocery lists, checks, lots of things. I can write letters in printing, and I never write those things," argued Maggie. "So I'm not going to learn cursive." She tossed her hair and asked to be excused. Kaiser felt that he too was excused. He trotted after Maggie and jumped up on her bed. As she hugged him, Maggie overheard her mother say, "I don't know what gets into Maggie. Most of the time she behaves herself, and then suddenly she doesn't." "Contrary kid," said her father. Chapter 2. The next day, after the third grade monitors had led the flag salute, changed the date on the calendar, fed the hamster, and done all the housekeeping chores that third grader monitors do in the morning, Mrs. Leeper faced her class. Today is going to be a happy day. The third grade looked hopeful. Today was a big step in growing up, said Miss Leeper. We are going to learn cursive handwriting. We are going to learn to make our letters flow together. Mrs. Leeper made flow sound like a long, long word as she waved her hand in a graceful, flowing motion. She calls that exciting, thought Maggie, slumping into her chair. How many of you have ridden on a roller coaster? Asked Mrs. Leeper. Half the members of the class raised their hands. Mrs. Leeper wrote on the chalkboard, A, B, C, D, M, N. Many letters start up slowly, just like a roller coaster, and then they drop down, she said, and she traced over the first stroke of each letter with a colored chalk. Then she went on to demonstrate how the roller coaster climbed up almost straight up. After the paper monitor passed out the papers, the class practiced, not whole letters, but roller coaster strokes. Maggie did as she was told until she grew quite bored and began to draw one long roller coaster line that rose and fell, turned and twisted, and rose again. So many of the class needed help with their strokes that Mrs. Leeper did not get around to Maggie. The next day, after strokes, the class practiced whole letters, some with loops that went up, some with loops that went down. This was difficult. The third grade frowned, worried, struggled, and asked Miss Leeper whether they were doing it right. Then they learned to connect letters with straight lines. Maggie went on drawing her roller coasters until Mrs. Leeper noticed. Uh-oh. Why, Maggie, she said, why haven't you been working on your loops and lines? I am working, said Maggie, on roller coasters. Mrs. Leeper looked thoughtfully at Maggie, who tried to look happy. Roller coasters are not cursive, said the teacher. I know, agreed Maggie, but I don't need cursive. I use our computer. Maggie, I think you had better stay after school so we can talk a little, said Mrs. Leeper. I have to catch my bus, said Maggie with her sweetest smile. That afternoon, Maggie examined cursive writing wherever she found it. Why does your writing on the grocery list lean backwards? She asked her mother. Mrs. Leeper says that you should lean forward if you're writing against the wind. I'm left-handed. My teachers didn't show me how to turn my paper, answered Mrs. Schwartz. And what are those little circles floating around? Asked Maggie. Her mother laughed. When I was in junior high, girls often made circles instead of dots over their eyes. We thought it was an artistic or something touch to our writing. I don't really remember. That evening, Maggie stood at her father's side as he wrote a letter on the computer. When he pulled the paper out of the printer, he picked up a pen and wrote at the bottom. What does that say? Asked Maggie. That's how I sign my name, said her father. Sydney Schwartz. You didn't close your loops, Maggie pointed out. You're supposed to close loops on letters that have pieces that hang down. She had learned a thing or two in spite of herself. Oops, said Mr. Schwartz, and he closed his loops. I hope you guys enjoyed the first 2 chapters of Muggy Maggie. We'll see what happens to her.